Hi, everyone. My name is Brad Lawless. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for TinyMCE, and we're really happy to have you join us today on our webinar exploring everything that we've come out with new this year in Tiny 7. Fantastic. So, a little bit of housekeeping. You can see along the bottom, we've got a crawl with the URL. If you'd like to download today's presentation or bring it up in your browser, you can do that. The presentation will have links for everything that we're talking about. I'm also going to be putting links along the bottom of the screen throughout the webinar, just for context
Mhm.
and to help you follow along if you would like. We've got a lot that we're going to cover. For those of you that may not be current users of TinyMCE, we're going to give you a brief overview of that. And then we're going to talk about our use case that we're going to use today, putting everything in an LMS context, building a learning management system with TinyMCE, and use that to walk through all of our newest features. So, what is TinyMCE? We are a JavaScript based rich text editor component. It's basically, if you've used Shopify, you have used us. We are this part of the experience. Anywhere where you need to create text content, format it, manipulate it in many different ways, that's what we do. We have a very adaptable UI. You can implement TinyMCE in just a couple of minutes with a few lines of code. And we have integrations into most major platforms today, like Angular, React, and Vue. We can be hosted, you can use us through a cloud hosted solution or self hosted as well.
Awesome. So, when we're talking about use case, we would like to put TinyMCE for you in the context of a learning management system editor, but that doesn't mean TinyMCE can only be used in a learning management system. Today, we're going to show you how this component basically just fits into your larger React application. So, if you see over here, this component is specifically what we're going to be focusing on. And you can see how this can extend into your specific use case, whether it is a learning management system, like the example today, or an email editor or a CMS solution. Basically, these functionalities of import from Word, Markdown support, AI assistant, we believe can extend beyond just a learning management system. So, yeah, let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is set up TinyMCE. I already have the base code for you on GitHub to follow along. We also have a few other resources over here, the TinyMCE React Quick Start. The demo we're going to be doing today is going to be in React. We also have a TinyMCE setting it up in under 2 minutes. And yes, it literally only takes you 2 minutes to set up TinyMCE in your application, as well as other quick start guides if you're using other frameworks, as Brad mentioned, Angular Vue, and so much more. I think we have over 12 framework integrations. So let's get started with how to set it up. This is the code base that I have set up for you guys, and it's called What's New with TinyMCE. All you have to do is simply clone, just like you'd clone any other GitHub repo, and you should be ready to get started. Once you clone the code, what you're going to be seeing is very simple React application with composable components. And you can see that TinyMCE fits right into one of these components. So I set up TinyMCE as a standalone component called Tiny Editor inside this larger application that has a sidebar, the main content, and so on and so forth. So let's see how that actually looks in my local host. So I've got this app up and running. And if I look over here, TinyMCE, this component is standing alone within the larger application. How do you set it up? So if you have React today, we have actually a React wrapper for this component. All you have to do is go and install npmi tinymce react, and you should be able to get something like this in your package.json file. Once you have that set up, you go to your individual component, just import the editor from that package, and then you should be able to just return that component and just get started. And we have all of this set up for you. So you start it with an API key. In this version of TinyMCE, we're using the cloud hosted solution. So you would need a TinyMCE API key over here. And then on in it, we're just referencing the editor to the main null component. And then after that, we have some initializations, like all of the base plugins and the toolbar, and then an initial value to just sort of start our use case today. So that's all the setup you need to really get started with TinyMCE. Of course, so yeah, one of the features that we're showcasing once you have a basic editor set up is import from Word. A lot of times before this functionality, maybe you are a professor answering a student's questions and you've just been copy pasting from Word documents. And sometimes Word documents can be single pages or multiple pages, and it's just a lot of hassle to copy paste. So imagine if you had the functionality to just be able to bring in some of your lecture notes right into your application. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's switch back over to the code and let's look at it. So in order to be able to import from Word, you need three things. You first need to bring in import Word as a plugin into your editor. Next, you need to be able to add it to the toolbar as a option. So you just say import Word and you add it to a toolbar as an option. I'm going to do it before undo and redo because it makes more sense to me. It's a quick start for that. And then finally, what you're going to need is an import Word service URL. And this service URL is really important because this is what points to our specific conversion API. Currently, this feature is only available and exclusively on on-prem setups, which means you're going to require a self-hosted version of the docx to HTML conversion, essentially. So I have this set up on my computer already. And all you're going to have to do is once you get access to that, just contact us to give you a sample URL. We will be able to give that to you. For now, I'm going to actually just use the service URL that I have provided. Again, if you would like to try this out on your own, just contact us and we'll provide you with a sample service URL. So three things: set it up in the plugins, set it up in your toolbar, add your service URL. Once you have all of that set up, let's go ahead and refresh the screen. To my cursor up over here, I want to import all of those lecture notes over here. I have some sample lecture notes that look something like this, and it's actually relevant to that specific student's question. So I'm going to click on that and say import, and look at that. All of the
Yeah.
formatting is preserved and imported right into your folder. What are your thoughts on this, Brad?
I think it looks great. So import from Word is a new feature for us that was released in Tiny 7.0. You can see it allows you to bring in those full documents. We also have another feature related to this, very powerful, called Power Paste, where if you're bringing sections of Word documents, you just want to copy a paragraph, you're able to pop that in as well. So this new feature gives you multiple options for interfacing with potentially a lot of legacy content you have or content that you receive from people outside your organization.
And if you want to get access to the solution on how it actually is solved, simply just go to step 2, import Word in your GitHub repo, and you should be able to see the solution for yourself. You could just look at the compare over here, and you'll be able to see exactly what changes I made for import from Word. The next feature that we have is Markdown. Markdown is a feature really exciting for me as a developer because you get to paste Markdown content directly into the editor. So now we have that for you in TinyMCE. How does this look when we look at it from the point of view of code? Well, it's actually quite simple. In order to add Markdown to your editor, all you have to actually do is just add Markdown to your plugins option, and it should automatically be added to your rich text editor. There is no toolbar option because it's just a copy paste solution. And let's see how this would actually look like. Sample file over here. So one of the questions that student asked was, hey, I'm worried about how the homework will affect my grades. Let's say the syllabus is stored in a markdown file. Previously with the editor, you were not able to copy paste it. It would not have a smooth paste. It would look something like this. That's not really ideal, but now that we have Markdown, let's refresh the page and then, yep. So you paste it in, Command Shift V, we're automatically able to preserve all of the content from your Markdown file directly into your editor, which is really amazing if you think about it.
I mean, it saves a ton of time. And this particular feature is a great example of how easy it is to add functionality to TinyMCE with the majority of our features. Some advanced things like the import to Word, we're going to see AI Assistant here in a second, have other configurations, but the majority of our features, you add a module name and you add it to the menu and you're good to go with your users.
We also have a few resources for you. We have the Markdown overview as well as the documentation, but we also have a how to add Markdown blog that will walk you through how to add this functionality to your rich text editor. So feel free to check these out, and let's move on to making this editor a little bit more powerful. Math equations. I would say math equations is really exciting because think of an LMS use case where we saw that lecture notes, it had integrals and fractions and so much complexity. And you would ideally be wanting to type things natively in LaTeX. And that's not a functionality you get out of rich text editors today. But that changes with Math Equations plugin, and I'm going to show you how. If you want to add math equations, all you have to do, and again, it's as simple as the plugins we've been adding before. You simply add math to your plugins option. And then let's say you want to add math over here. So add it to your toolbar, add it to your plugins option, and that should automatically enable the math plugin in your editor. And once you have that set up, let's say we did that same workflow of having those lecture notes, and then we realized that we want to talk about this new integral and we want to insert something right there, then we can actually choose between LaTeX and MathML. So in this case, I'm going to choose LaTeX, and then I'm going to say, I want an integral that says UDV over here, and I want it not wrapped above and below the text, but actually in line with the text. And it shows you this nice little preview to know what I'm getting out of this. And then I can quickly hit save. And then just like that, I have a fully functioning math equations editor right in my TinyMCE editor. And you can go back and re-edit that equation. Maybe you want to add UVDV or something like that. So it's pretty great. It's very flexible, and it just gives you a lot of functionality.
Well, exactly. Lots of math going on in institutions of learning. This is also a great example of Tiny's commitment to bringing functionality that our customers and their end users want natively in the solution. There have been third-party formula solutions in the past, but that just presents you with, another point of integration that you have to maintain, another relationship that you have to maintain. With this feature, everything is native. It's as easy to set up as what you just saw, and you give your end users the ability to present content the way they need.
And if you want to learn a little bit more about our math equations, there we have an entire feature page that you can click into our resources, as well as math equations documentations that you can dig into and learn more about how to use the different types of LaTeX and MathML in your rich text editor. All right, the next demo, I actually have a few different types over here, which is the AI assistant. The AI assistant is not new to TinyMCE. We actually launched this in TinyMCE 6 itself, but with TinyMCE 7, we are actually bringing in all of these different types of integration. We at Tiny are very much committed to the idea that you should be able to, as a developer, bring your own AI. We don't want to lock you into a specific vendor, and we want to provide you the resources to be able to integrate with the AI of your choice. And in this case, we have integrations with not only OpenAI, but now Azure's OpenAI, AWS Bedrock, as well as Gemini integrations. So we're going to look through a few of this and just see how easy it is to switch between a few of these options. And you're going to see me get some of this code directly from the docs. So there's no magic behind the scenes. Go here to the TinyMCE AI Assistant plugin documentation. And here you can actually see the different guidelines on how to get started. So natively, what we have over here is the OpenAI ChatGPT integration guide. We can either get it as a string response, or you can get it as a streaming response. In terms of OpenAI, all you really need is an API key. So what we're going to do, and in order to get that API key, if you have a OpenAI account set up, for example, I have one right here, you simply go to your dashboard, click on projects, and then click on API key. And then you can actually see all of your API key associated to your specific project. In this case, this is just my default project, and I'll be using a TinyMCE webinar API key. You can choose to use whichever key kind of fits your use case. All right, let's get started with that. So as I said, I'm going to show you how to just copy paste this from the documentation, and it should work right out of the box. So I'm going to first go ahead and add this piece of code over here that we've provided into my editor here. I have all of this set up. All right. And then, of course, I have my OpenAI API key set up in my config options already. And that's all the work you need to really do. And then I'm going to add in AI into my plugins option. I'll add AI dialog and AI shortcuts over here. I'll quickly make sure I added, all right, I did that right. And then all we're going to have to do is add AI request over here. That is this function that handles this API response. You can read into it more in our documentation, and then I have my API key configured. That's it. This, of course, is happening all on the client side. If you're using OpenAI or AI Assistant, ideally you'd handle AI request on your server side with a proxy server. This is just for demo purposes, just to show you how quick it is to set up. All right, once I have all of this set up, let's go back over here to our demo. And look at that. I have the AI options right in my editor, just as always. And then, of course, I can do something like change the tone to something more professional. And it does that. Let's say you're a product manager or you're a developer and you decide to change your AI service. Now, you're not OpenAI necessarily anymore, but you make a slight pivot and you go into something like Azure AI. Well, we do have guidelines on how to switch between this editor, and not much changes from the front end perspective. You still pass in the AI plugin, it's still the AI dialog and AI shortcuts in the toolbar. The only thing that really changes is your AI request and how you handle the API response. So let's look at how the streaming response looks like for the Azure AI integration over here. What you really need is an Azure AI OpenAI key, as well as an Azure OpenAI endpoint. This again should be available right in your setup. So here I have a TinyMCE project set up within my Azure AI Studio. Just go ahead and look at the code, and if you scroll down, you should be able to see your specific endpoint. In this case, you can either use GPT-4. We also have access to GPT-4o mini. Let's change it up a little bit. I could even use that. And what I'm going to do is have this running in the background as my endpoint. And then I have access to my API key that I can go ahead and copy into my configuration. It's that simple. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. Just copy this in to your editor. All right, let's go. So I have this set up for you over here. And then, as I said, I already have my config set up for an Azure OpenAI key. And then I'm going to set it up over here such that I have my Azure OpenAI endpoint. Again, this is not something I'm kind of getting on my own. It's simply stuff I have configured from this Azure AI Studio. All right. So once I have all of this set up, as you saw, I've not really changed my actual editor or actual front end code. I'm just changing how the back end handles the request, which you would have to do in any case if you're changing services. You can simply do that. Let's go back to the editor. Now we have Azure running in the background, and maybe let's ask Azure to change it to something more friendly. And look at that. As we can see from best regards, it's changed it up to take care, and then we can just insert that and it works right out of the box. Now, I know we've only showed GPT-4 solutions. What if you're not an OpenAI or GPT user? Maybe you want something more open source and you want access to this huge range of models, and you have like something like AWS Bedrock. So we do have integration options right into that as well. I'm going to show you one last demo on how simple it is to set up. Again, it's the exact same thing. You really don't have to change anything to add AWS Bedrock. Keep the AI plugin, keep the AI dialog and AI shortcuts. All you're changing is the streaming response. One other thing we do need to add is this SDK, AWS Client Bedrock Runtime SDK. The way to do that, and I'm going to live demo and hopefully that works, is you copy this and just like you would. So, for example, where's my terminal? There it is. Let's go in here and then I'm going to say npmi AWS Bedrock. And then if you actually go into your package.json, you should see the AWS Client Bedrock runtime. So that's the only other change, just based on the nuances of that specific editor that you need from a front end perspective, or in your Node.js environment based on how you're running that. And then once you have that, you need to import this at the top. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to import the client runtime as well as invoke model command. And then once you do that, the other stuff should look very similar in terms of how we're handling. So instead of using this sort of fetch API, we're doing that. All right. And as you can see, this code is actually more condensed for what it's worth. Here we're using Anthropic's specific version of Bedrock from May 31st, 2023. You can, of course, change it and adjust it as you need. All right, what I'm gonna do, there we go. I have that up and running. And then once I have all of that, I'm gonna need an access key ID, a secret access key, and a session token. If you have a Bedrock account already set up, you can simply go to your own access keys and you'll get a list of access keys option. Specific thing you really need to, even if you have the key ID, is to be able to get the session token and other as well as the secret access key. And once you have all three of those, you should be able to get this up and running. So for my use case, I'm going to say config dot AWS access key ID. I already have this set up in my configuration option just to save us some time. Once I have all of this set up, it should ideally work out of the box. And as I said, I haven't really not touched this when I'm switching between providers. The only big difference that is happening is in the AI request. So I'm going to keep my original config, which is more generic with all my API keys in there. And then I'm going to call this config AWS that I'm passing into my Bedrock client. That's all the changes I did. But outside of that, it should work right out of the box. So I'm going to try changing the style, and maybe I want to change it to a slightly more journalistic style. Let's see what the AI assistant for AWS comes up with. And look at that. It's pretty casual. You wouldn't think a professor would ever type something like this, but it's also saying catch you up on the flip
But
side.
you on the flip side, that's yeah, my professors talk like that all the time.
All right. This is great. So it might take a little bit of effort depending on which AI integration you have, but at the end of the day, what you really need is your key, your tokens, whether you're using Google Gemini. We also have an integration guide for that with project ID, region, and API, but it's a very simple change your AI request according to what your LLM API requires, and you should be able to switch between providers with TinyMCE's AI assistant. The last thing we're going to do is export. So not only can you now import from Word, as we saw previously, you can also export to PDF or export to Word. Let's say you want to take something back into your content creation app, or maybe you want to print it for other purposes and you want to send it as a separate email or save it for housekeeping purposes. You can do that right within your editor. As always with TinyMCE, it's only a few editor configurations. For this example, and for the purposes of time, I'm going to go ahead and do export PDF. And I'm going to say export PDF service URL. All right. One more thing that we need to do is the most important thing, add it to our plugins option. So add it to your plugins option, add it in your toolbar, and then get a service URL from us. Again, whether it's import or export, it's the same thing there. It's only available on premise setups right now, so just reach out to our support team and we'll be able to provide you something to get started. If you're an existing customer, reach out to your account manager and they should be able to help you get started with that service URL that really does all the magic in the background. All right, once you have all of these three things set up in your editor, you can actually refresh this. And let's go through like a little bit of a workflow to see like how this looks, right? Maybe we've imported something. Then we also added something, right? We added Markdown over here. And maybe all of this looks great. And then we're going to say, let's export all of this into a PDF document. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. As you can see over here, we have that PDF exported exactly as you have it in your rich text editor with all of the formatting preserved right there, which is great. You can do the exact same thing if you're looking to do export to Word. Instead of export to PDF in your editor, all that would be is export Word in your plugins, as well as the service URL specific to export Word. So that's how simple it is to get the export Word document converter functionality and export PDF functionality. We have a few resources in the slides for you, such as the overview and the documentation for both. So please feel free to check it out and learn how you can customize it for your specific use cases. And then let's go to something that is really exciting in terms of features and functionality, which is revision history. So, revision history is just imagine you've kind of, gone through all of this work and then you decide, all right, none of this actually matters. I really want to just go back to how things was in the start. Well, the only option today you have is hit this a bunch of times and hope you get back to that. And that's not ideal in any situation. So what we have for you is revision history. Think in Google Docs when you're able to have version history control. It's very similar experience to that. One more thing you should know about this revision history plugin is that it does, so if you do have commented HTML, it does mark it as valid content, but when you have revision comparison processes, it will disregard that. So that's the only thing to keep in mind with revision history. But yeah, again, as always, it's pretty simple with TinyMCE. You add it to your plugins option. You go ahead and add revision to toolbar. I think it makes most sense to be within undo and redo. Revision history, I can spell. And then finally, what you need is a revision history fetch option. And what we're going to do for the purposes of our demo, yeah. So how we're going to do this is basically revision history takes in a specific promise that you need to resolve. So this, I'm going to call this get revisions. It's going to be a simple array in the promise, but in the case of this specific solution, what you do is you want to replace it with an API request to get saved revisions. So you would ideally have this stored in a database of some sort where all of your past revisions are getting stored. And yeah, so let's look at how this was going to look. And I'm going to do a very simple example over here, nothing too fancy. I'm going to add import const get revision, and I want it to be a new promise, as I said. And then the way I'm going to resolve it, Copilot is really glitching on me all the time. So I have a basic promise set up. I'm going to just say, hey, you get a set of revisions. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array, just like my Copilot is suggesting. But within this array, and this is basically mocking my database for you, I'm going to have an object, and that object is going to have a revision ID. Let's call that 1. It's going to have a created at, let's maybe set the date to today. Maybe you've saved it a few hours ago, something like that. And then I'm going to have the content. And I should probably have these in. All right. So I have all of this set up. I have my revision set up over here with the initial content. Again, it's just a mock thing. I have my get revision set up over here. And then I have my revision fetch and history. You can see revision history is already provided. Let's make a few of those changes that we've already talked about over here. Let's use our AI assistant to make something more professional, right? Let's remove that. And all of that looks good. But then I want to go back to my original thing. I can actually just go back to revision history. You can see all of the different changes that I've made very specifically, and then you can also see what I had originally. So that's why it's pretty powerful. Let's click on that, say restore this version, and you should be able to go right back to your original version. And it's very simple, actually. You basically set up your API to pull some revisions out of a database, and the database is a simple object with revision ID created at timestamp, as well as your HTML content. So once you have all of that set up, you should be able to use revision history right within your TinyMCE rich text editor. And if you are very interested in revision history, please do check out our features on the revision history overview, as well as revision history documentation for more information on it.
What we saw today was the feature at launch. Coming out actually just next week, we will have the ability to add users to that, and we'll have a demo of that in a future webinar or a video on our YouTube channel. You did a great job. We got through everything in
Awesome.
record time. So a couple of housekeeping notes, and we did have one question I want to address. If you want to find out the information on all of the latest TinyMCE releases, you can use this link. It'll take you to a post on our blog where we've just got a catalog of release notes, essentially launch notes for each version. There will be a new one next week for TinyMCE 7.3. The question we had from Adam is if there's scope to have export to Word in the cloud plans eventually. And the answer to that is yes. We are looking to have that toward the back half of this year. We don't have a specific date for it yet. Adam, if you're a current TinyMCE user, you could, work with your account folks and they'll be able to keep you up to date on that. Also, if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, you can go to tiny.cloud and do that. We will be keeping everyone updated on different innovations that we are bringing out and where we are on those things. Last couple of things, as far as these features are concerned, Markdown is available in all of our paid plans. Everything else that we showed you is currently available through our sales assisted channel, working directly with our salespeople, and they're on-prem hosted. But just like the document converters features, we are looking to have them all available in the cloud as soon as we can get it out to you. Really do appreciate everyone joining us today. If you're not a current TinyMCE customer, you can get a 14-day free trial of most of our features by going to tiny.cloud. Also have this URL set up for you. And we're happy to answer any questions anyone has. Miranda and I are both available on socials, and we also have a contact form available on the site as well. Miranda, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
If you are a developer of TinyMCE and you're looking to learn a little bit more on how to use us, keep up to date, of course, subscribe to our newsletter. Also, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, stay connected with us on socials. And we also have a public roadmap on our website. So if you're looking for new features, please feel free to add and make requests in our public roadmap.
And if there's content you want to see in the future that would be valuable to you as a developer, hit us up. Let us know. I mean, we're here to make your life easier, make implementing TinyMCE more enjoyable, and help you bring some joy to your end users at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And we are at time. So with that, we're going to let you get back to your workday. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Happy coding, everyone.